Good morning, Mayor Sorace. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Good morning, Mike. It's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
How's your day going?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I've done a couple of press interviews today and was also over at our fire station, which is going to be demolished.
Oh, this is the one that's going to be rebuilt?
Yep. So
Right.
we're tearing down Station 1 and all the things in the day of the life.
That's right. Right. And under COVID-19, every day is always different than what we plan.
Yeah, it's depressing to go through my calendar and be canceling literally everything or realizing, well, that's not going to happen and that's not going to happen.
Right. We certainly have adapted, though, found new ways of doing things. Case in point, our day of giving for Tabor and LHOP. Usually we'd have a banquet room filled at Shady Maple, and this year it'll all be online on Facebook and Zoom and every other digital method we can think of. So thanks for being a part of it.
I'm glad to be a part of it. Glad to support Tabor and LHOP.
Our theme of the Tabor LHOP Day of Giving is actually LHOP's tagline, but it's a tagline that I think really resonated with all of us, both from Tabor and LHOP through our merger process, is this idea that everyone deserves a place to call home. What does that phrase mean to you?
Home for me is a refuge. It is a place where I can be myself and be with those who love me on my best days and my worst days.
That's the truth, and that goes. You've shared before some of the personal challenges that you faced as a child growing up with some housing difficulties. I think that story is really powerful for people to know that while those challenges are indeed very difficult, they don't necessarily define someone's future. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that story?
You know, Mike, this past weekend, my family and I took a little drive, and I wanted to show my daughter the places that I lived when I lived here in Lancaster County. And so we drove by the farm in Reams where my father was injured. And I was describing the chores that my mom and I predominantly were feeding about 80 calves bottle fed, which was like so time consuming.
Wow.
And it was an embryo transfer farm. And so it wasn't like a typical farming life. It was a lot about calves and their moms. So when we were driving by, it was there that my dad got hurt. And it was also there where we had an auction sale. And I so clearly remember that day of having all of our things except for our beds. And my mom was like, you need to keep your bed and your dresser and everything else that you can think of that we are going to sell. And it was through that process that we then subsequently moved to another house, and things just got worse there. My dad's health wasn't really improving. My mom had other health issues. She had had surgery, and we were on food stamps. And at some point, my dad and mom decided that we were going to move again, except we were moving to a trailer, a pop-up camper trailer with a tent room. And my dad was going to build a house. And so we moved in April, and I was at the end of my 5th grade, and the bus wouldn't come to pick me up because there was no house. And that's,
wow.
I think when I realized, like, oh, we are actually homeless because we don't actually have a house. And so because we don't have a house and there isn't like an address for us, the bus is not going to come and pick me up. And fast forward to, a summer living and in a tent using an outhouse and cooking over a camp stove. And, I think a lot of people were like, oh, well, this is really novel and that's fun and interesting, but didn't necessarily understand the financial impact behind it or like what was actually going on. And I never talked about it, like it wasn't like, oh yeah, I live in a tent. It wasn't like that. I will never forget being able to sleep inside doors in October of that year and it being so quiet. All the night sounds were really muffled, and we lived in a house that was so not finished. There was plywood on the floors, CertainTeed R27 insulation, like was the wall covering. There was only one wall in the house, and that was for the bathroom. Nothing about the house was finished. And we lived that way for a long time until over time, my family was able to recover. But, when my dad died in 1999, his salary was $18,500.
Wow.
And that was my starting salary at my first job in 1994 when I graduated from college.
Frozen.
And it is never lost on me that this choice and a lot of love and encouragement from my family, because my mom just drilled in me that I was going to get an education. And that for me was my pathway out, because without that education, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. That's incredibly powerful. And I can only imagine how challenging that was. And, there's certain stigma that goes along with being low income. Having to navigate that as a child is difficult. Having to navigate that as an adult is difficult. And
I want to just say something else about that, about being a kid in that midst, because you don't really understand. You love, like I love my parents, but you don't really understand the stress because you're just in it. It's like you're in water and you don't know you're in water. And it wasn't until later that I realized all of the things that I did, because that was my growing up experience. And it was really in hiding who I was, being ashamed of my experience and never ever letting anybody come to my house, or really just trying to pretend and pose that I was something different. And it feels so good to let all of that go.
Yeah, I think there's real power in you being able to live that full story authentically, and also power in sort of that being a role model for others, and knowing that we have a lot of people in our community who are struggling financially even before COVID, now even more after COVID because of the economic fallout. But like you said, there are reasons for hope, and reasons that the sort of next chapters of those stories will look different, just like yours did.
Mm-hmm. That's the hope. And that is the work, and why the work of Tabor and LHOP is so important, because as much as it is about the practical needs, it is also about having a sense of hope and optimism for your future. And that is even harder now, because there are just so many more challenges. And that means that the work that you all are doing is even more important. And also because there will be more people coming to LHOP and Tabor who have never, ever had to ask for help before.
Mm-hmm.
And the way in which we as a community respond to others in this situation with dignity and a recognition that we all need help sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I really appreciate about our team at both Tabor and LHOP, is we really do meet people where they are, and those conversations are without judgment. And some of our team members have been in those same situations that the person now on the phone, but before sitting across from them, was in. And I've had folks come up to me who are now executive directors or business leaders who said, I was at risk of losing my house, and Tabor helped me with the foreclosure process. And I was able to stay in that house, and then sold that house, and then that built from there. And those stories are always affirming. And sometimes it's people who are willing to share that, and sometimes it's like, as an aside, whispering, as if there's still some of that shame there. So I really do want people to know that we are here to help. And whether you ever found yourself needing help before or not, it doesn't matter. If you need it, just ask, and we'll figure it out with you. And there is ways to resolve some of the challenges that people are facing.
Yes.
I think one of the things that has really sort of struck me through COVID is the inequality that it's kind of exposed. So I've really been reflecting a lot on this notion of the stay-at-home order, which is absolutely appropriate response from the public health lens. But the language of it is really powerful, because for people who don't have a home, who are living on the streets, or maybe who are living in a shelter somewhere in our community, obviously that lands on their ears totally differently. That challenge existed 2 months ago. The need was there. Now the population who is facing some of that housing uncertainty is even bigger. So what do you think the response looks like now? The new reality we're in, how do we now that we've had some of those initial cracks kind of in the foundation of our society more visibly exposed because of COVID, how do we not just forget about it 6 months, 12 months from now, but really do something about it?
I was reading, and I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but that this is an opportunity for us to address the inequities in our community. That is a once in a generation opportunity, because they have been laid bare. And I think about that a lot, because there's a lot of work that we collectively have been attempting to do to address inequality. And now it's so clear. And, when I'm talking about staying at home and social distancing, it is so clear to me that that is not an option for our homeless, but it is also not an option for people who are essential workers and who are doing low income employment. Mm-hmm. And who are working low wage jobs. And I think about that because I think a lot of our cases in our community are as a result of people who are going to work. They want to continue to work. They understand the realities that if they aren't able to work, they're on the edge. And, another person was talking about walking down King Street by the pawn shop and seeing a line of people with all of their things going into the pawn shop to sell, to be able to pay their bills, to put food on their table, to pay their rent. And I think about the stay-at-home order and saying that, staying at home, when home is, I remember it was a stressful, unhappy place for a long time. And it centered around a complete lack of money and food. And I was doing everything that I could to find and go someplace else to eat. And I think about the kids, especially right now, who don't have their social network. They can't necessarily get out from stress, from that stress that, that they had no say in. So I do feel that there are going to be long-term, and we're hearing about some of this from, countries that are quasi-recovering, like in China, and the toll, because people have lost loved ones, people have lost jobs, people have lost their businesses. There's suffering. Mm-hmm. And in that suffering is also, a call to us to think about how do we get this right, if we are going to be and will be rebuilding our community, that there is more equity, that there are more safeguards. And I don't mean to like talk about this in terms of like the government, you know, just recognizing that I'm the mayor and this is, and my position is part of government. But I mean it in terms of how we're caring for one another at the most basic level.
Mm-hmm.
And how are we treating our employees, our neighbors as ourselves? Like where is that? And are we just going to try to just go back to the way that it was, which was good for a lot of people, but it was also really bad for a lot of people too. And I represent a lot of those folks. You know, we were making progress in pushing down the number of people living in poverty, but that is, we're starting over, and hopefully in a new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we'll need kind of an all hands on deck response, because like you said, it is once in a generation damage that we're all exposed to and suffering through right now. And so we're going to need that once in a generation call, just like, you know, people answered the call after the Depression and during World War II to serve their neighbors and the common good in different ways. I want to pivot a little bit and ask about kind of leading through the crisis. I think you have been recognized for your straightforward, frequent, and fact-based communication. You know, Mayor's Live at 5 every day has really been, I think, an effective tool. What do you think are some of the sort of leadership traits that you've leaned on during this crisis?
Honesty. I think that there's been no way to sugarcoat how bad the situation is, and also being a hopeful person. I think that being clear and honest and also offering hope is a really important combination at this time. I think that those first few weeks were so hard. Just wrapping, and it's still unfolding, obviously, but wrapping your head around exactly what was happening and how life was going to be changing. And now, where are we? We're 8 weeks in. You know, by my count, I think about this really starting on the second week of March in terms of the complete switching of gears. You know, prior to that, it was like, okay, what is this? How's this? You know, I see this in Seattle. I've seen, you know, what was happening across the globe. But from that point forward, it has been the kind of crisis that has been referred to, and this was really helpful for me when I first heard it, a slow roll crisis. Like there isn't sort of this like one cataclysmic event and we're all coming together to respond to this one event and then sort of a receding. It's been this level of generalized anxiety and stress that is on top of like, I don't have a job anymore. I don't have a home. I don't, you know, and so, and everybody's experiencing it. And so the degree to which we have to dig deep to have empathy and be graceful with one another is, you know, and how everybody deals with this is all different. And so I think that the thing that I have come back to that has helped me the most is that in this moment right now, just talking to you, Mike, I'm okay. And if I can hold that I'm okay and focus on what's in front of me right now and bring my best thinking to that with the information I have right now, and acknowledge that I don't have all the answers, but I am going to be honest and I'm going to continue to be hopeful. That's basically been my modus operandi.
Yeah.
That's how I've been trying to hold myself in this space
Mhm.
of so much uncertainty.
I think about what Kedron Crosby from Work Wisdom often says about leaders' emotions being contagious. And so, how are we sort of regulating our own emotions so that those ripple effects aren't affecting the people around us, our team and our partners or families in ways that maybe aren't helpful, while also being very authentic of like, this is scary, this is unsettling. I don't have all the answers, but we're trying and trying to come from a place, like you said, of hope. I think that really has been something that I've leaned on as well. And I think it's the partnerships too, across the community, across the county. We sort of are characteristically collaborative in good times.
Mm-hmm.
That in my experience in the past 7-8 weeks now, it feels like that has ramped up tenfold.
Yes,
Just
I agree. And I'm so appreciative of that because there's no one organization. There wasn't one before, and there is surely not one now that is going to be doing all of the things, which brings me to how exciting it is that LHOP and Tabor are merging. I am really excited about the partnership and just the bringing together of a full complement of housing resources for folks who are moving along a continuum or need help at a particular point in the process, that there will be this alignment of services. I think that is only a good thing, and I'm really excited for you and for Shelby.
Thank you, Mayor. That's something that I think we're really thrilled about. And honestly, the COVID crisis has kind of proven the point. We went into that process thinking, hey, we could be stronger together. And that was during good times where undoubtedly there was still a lot of need across the community, for sure. We still had a housing crisis before COVID. Now seeing that need grow so rapidly, our teams being able to work together has been unbelievable, and being able to deploy this deep bench to start helping people, whether they're tenants, landlords, homeowners, people who are perhaps uniquely affected because of a disability, like whatever it is, we have people on our teams who can be a resource for that. And I think that's something that we are looking forward to offering the community, this wider menu, and looking at the gaps that are there. Now that we're stitching all the pieces together, we know there's still gaps. Right now, we're looking at people who, for a variety of reasons, lost their housing right before COVID arrived in our community. They were in a hotel with a plan to move into some other rental housing. And then when COVID hit, the availability of rental housing kind of froze up overnight for a period of time. Now their bank accounts are nearly empty. They don't quite qualify for the homeless services yet. They don't quite qualify for the eviction prevention services were out there because they were already out of their housing. It's like, well, the need's there. What are we going to do? And thankfully, with things like Lancaster Cares Fund and some of the new money that came from the CARES Act, there is an opportunity to figure out how we can serve that group as well. So we have to evolve based on the need that's changing.
And we have to get flexible. I mean, one of the things that I remember from our time on food stamps and so on is that, you qualify for certain things, but you don't qualify for other things. And, people and their lives don't fit in check boxes. And it's
So true.
really, really damaging to hold out like, well, we can help you with this, but we can't help you with this. And I remember so clearly my dad being on the phone with somebody from the welfare office. That's how he called it. And they were like, well, we can give you this much in food stamps and this much money in utility assistance. And my dad was like, well, we actually don't need the utility assistance because we could heat our home with a ton of coal. Literally, my dad would go and get a ton of coal. He built this coal bin and it was $80 to get a ton of coal. And so we didn't need the utility assistance, but we needed more in the way of food stamps. And that was just not an option.
Right.
And it was like, it just didn't make sense to him. And he found the whole thing so demoralizing, that he didn't really want to work. His whole focus was like, okay, I want out of this. This is like, you're trying to be helpful, but you're not really being helpful. And that's what I mean when I say, people's lives don't fit into these neat check boxes. We do need to have more flexibility. And COVID is just underscoring that for the exact example that you just gave.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's the programs are designed with good intentions, but sometimes when they're actually implemented, they're creating further barriers than what they were intended to, and we just have to do better. Thank you, Mayor Sorace, for joining me for this great conversation about housing. It was really interesting to learn more about your story and your passion for expanding housing for everyone. Tabor has always had good relationships and appreciated the leadership in both parties in this county for their commitment to making housing more accessible for everyone. And we look forward to continuing that tradition in the years to come. Thank you.